You're listening to an On the Move Media Co. production.
Because we have such famous media brands, people think we're a media company. I would actually argue we're not a media company. We're more of a platform company because we now, the biggest base of users we have is actually in the mapping technology. So Trailforks, Gaia, and MapMyFitness have, it's a huge base of users. And so, that's one part of it. And then the other part is we own, an event registration platform. We own an event photography platform. So what we're really trying to do, Marnie, is we're trying to think about first, how do we inspire you through the content? And that content could be video, audio, written, whatever, medium you want. And then from inspiration, how do we take you into activation? How do I get you to register for an event? How do I get you to go out and do a hike? How do I get you through that process so that and then ultimately, how do you celebrate that moment when you finish that run or finish that marathon or, finish that triathlon? We want to kind of be there across all of those steps, with you.
That was Robin Thurston. This is Marnie Salop. Thanks for tuning into my podcast, Marnie on the Move. Each week, I will be inviting interesting, innovative movers and shakers to join me on the show and share their story. You will discover and hear from thought leaders, experts, influencers, and entrepreneurs from the worlds of wellness, sports, beauty, fitness, fashion, and more. Marnie on the Move will feature an eclectic mix of people I know, work with, and think are generally doing cool things. On each episode, I sync up with my guests about life, career, and training, and showcase their expertise and story. Hello, welcome back to the Marnie on the Move podcast. I'm your host, Marnie Salop. Today, I'm joined by an industry visionary who has transformed the way we experience outdoor fitness and media. Robin Thurston, founder and CEO of Outside Interactive, Inc. Robin's journey is nothing short of inspiring. From his early days as a pro cyclist to becoming a trailblazing entrepreneur, he's built game-changing platforms that have redefined the way athletes, adventurers, and outdoor enthusiasts track their performance, connect with their communities, and consume media. In this episode, we dive into his evolution from athlete and pro cyclist to innovator, starting with the creation of MapMyRide and MapMyRun, which revolutionized fitness tracking before being acquired by Under Armour. We discuss his leadership lessons, the birth of Outside, and his vision for building a media ecosystem that unites outdoor sports, adventure, and wellness. Through Outside Interactive, Robin has brought together iconic media brands like Outside Magazine, Backpacker, Velo, Pinkbike, Trail Runner, Yoga Journal, Triathlete, and Women's Running, creating a powerhouse platform for athletes and outdoor enthusiasts. Robin also shares insights into the evolving fitness landscape, the role of technology in outdoor experiences, and what's next for Outside Interactive. Whether you're a triathlete, runner, endurance athlete, tech enthusiast, or someone passionate about the outdoors, this episode is packed with inspiration, insight, and forward-thinking ideas. So get ready to be motivated, and let's get into it. Before we dive into our conversation with Robin, quick reminder, if you like what you hear, take a screenshot, share this on your social, share it with your friends, wherever you like to get social. Leave us a review on Apple, 5 stars on Spotify or Apple. And don't forget, head over to our YouTube channel, On the Move Media, to get the scoop on the latest gear and running shoes, reviews, and video conversations. All right, let's get into it. You are such a pioneer, Robin, and I'm so psyched to be here talking to you. You're an innovator, a visionary. And before we dive in, do you think that because of your pro cycling career and all of your cycling that you've done, that was helpful in empowering you for success in everything else you've done in life?
I sort of joke often that I carried a lot of water bottles and, chased a lot of breakaways. I would say I was a good cyclist. I wouldn't say I was a great cyclist. And I think I was fortunate that, I got 4 years in Europe and racing and, with a lot of people that I'm still very good friends with. But I think the two most important things for me that came out of living in Europe and racing were, one is, I would just call it the discipline and consistency of something like cycling. And I think running has a very similar thing to it. I think triathlon does. The athletes in these endurance categories, and I definitely would say I benefited from this, I think have a certain amount of drive and sort of consistency in their training that I think when you start talking about business, it's like, I think that's how you have success, is you wake up every day. And in endurance sports, you train. You get out there, you put in the hours, you do the right training, and hopefully it pays off when you get to the event or the race, and I think business is very similar. I think you have to wake up and kind of like grind through the days that are just like, seem like they're impossible, but you put in the work and you kind of come out the other side. And, so I think that I would say sports in general, this is one of the reasons why I'm so, I'd say, and have hired a lot of athletes, over the years, because there's a certain amount of the, like one thing I say about sports a lot is, everybody wants to stand on a podium, Marty, like everybody, right? But a lot of people don't necessarily want to do the journey to get to the podium, right? And the reality is like, it's all about the journey. Like, I enjoy training more than I enjoy racing now. Like, I mean, I still do some events, and I'll go do gravel events and, some various things. But like, for me, it's the training. It's the process and the journey around that. I mean, I still ride, 7,500 miles a year. So, I mean, I ride 5-6 days a week, whether it's indoor on that thing or it's outdoors, most of the time outside. But, I think it's like, that's one thing that I would say about sports is like the foundation of consistency and putting in the work, no matter what the conditions are, I think is one way to get to a podium, to get to success in business. The other thing I would just say, like my experience there was, I would say certainly I was not, necessarily one of the star riders on the team. I was a good climber. I was a good like overall rider, but the reality for me was like that team environment was something that I really thrived in, and I would say learned a lot from at a very young age. And this goes all the way back to like even racing in the late 80s in Colorado. And so I think that environment between the training and the team environment was a very, very good setup for, how I think about, business and team building today. And, the other thing, there's a great quote from Reed Hastings at Netflix, about, Netflix isn't a family, it's a pro sports team. And I very much believe, I a little bit, I would say I cringe, Marty, when I hear companies call themselves families. I don't really believe companies are families. I definitely believe that, they're more like sports teams. And the reason I say that is like, if you have in your family, I always use this example of like someone like Terrell Owens in the NFL. I mean, he was kind of a terrible teammate and kind of stole all the spotlight, right? And that actually hurt the team in some ways. It's not that he didn't have amazing plays. It just hurt the team in some ways. And I think that, when you're building a company, you have to think a lot about, like, even if it means switching out someone that maybe isn't gelling with the team or isn't in the right position,
right,
that you have to move on pretty quickly. Because, if you want to build a great sports team or a great company, you have to keep trying to get all the right players in the right places. And that's not easy to do. I mean, when you got a team like, think about how hard it is with an NFL team or a cycling team or whatever, when you're talking about 9 riders who make it in the Tour de France team,
right,
as an example. let alone a company of 400, 500 people, or, like even when I was at Under Armour, the team was about 800, like it's hard. It is really, really hard to put a company together. And, I think about them like sports teams.
How did you get into cycling? Was it always something that you did? I mean, I know you're from Colorado, so maybe you grew up doing that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Actually, a guy here in Boulder, a guy named Mo Siegel, who was the founder of Celestial Seasonings. In the late 70s and early 80s, he decided to sponsor an event called the Red Zinger Classic, which became the Coors Classic. But he also sponsored what was called the Red Zinger Mini Classic, which was for kids my age, like to go try to race bicycles for the first time. And I lived in the area where the events were. And so I was just really fortunate that I had exposure. Again, if I hadn't grown up in Colorado, I don't think I'm a cyclist. Probably not. Probably I end up doing something else, but like it was a real opportunity being here and having that exposure at a very, very young age in the early 80s.
The first way I came to know you was through your first product that you developed.
In 2005, we launched MapMyRide and MapMyRun on the web. And what it was there was no way for me to draw a map as a consumer and then for me to send it to you. So like, let's say you were coming to Boulder. In 2004, there was no tool where I could create a map and send it to you and you could go do that ride or that run or whatever. So we had about a million registered users on the web before the iPhone app stores launched in July of 2008. And we were just fortunate. MapMyRun and MapMyRide were apps number 98 and 99 in the App Store. So like overall, I'm saying of all apps ever published in the App Store, they were apps number 98 and 99.
Okay, wow. So, and that was, I remember being on MapMyRide. So I don't know how I was on it. Probably just on my computer then.
If it was before July 2008, it was on your computer.
Yeah, definitely.
Because like there was no mobile apps.
There were no apps
July
then, right? Like that's so funny to think of a time where there were no apps. What inspired you? It was just you needed to develop maps or for cycling and running, and there just was nothing out there in the marketplace?
No, I mean, it was a very sort of like what I call sort of spark of the moment type of thing. I was in Europe on a cycling trip with a bunch of friends that were, people that I had raced with in Europe and people that that came with me. And one night we were sitting at dinner and somebody goes, "Oh, Robin, you lived here in Switzerland. It would be great if I could come to Switzerland and know all of these routes that you know from living here, and I could come back and do them on my own." And I was like, yeah, there's like guidebooks, but there's no like manual process for developing a route and then sending it to a friend. And so the first premise of MapMyRun and MapMyRide was a very, very simple way to record, like draw those maps and then to send them. And then what people would do is we had this like PDF generator that would allow you to fold them into fours, and then you put them in a Ziploc and you put them in your pocket. And the Ziploc, like you would have turn-by-turn directions, you would have the map and everything. And so, like, again, this, like, now this seems insane. Like, it's funny, I was talking to this university class the other day, and I was telling them this story, and they were like, wait a minute, let me get this straight. Like, you printed out a PDF and you put it in a Ziploc. Why would you do that if you had a phone? And I go, because you didn't. You didn't have a phone. You didn't have a smartphone. There wasn't a way to do that,
Right.
So it generated on that idea, and then we got lucky. We launched 2 of the first 100 iPhone apps, and I would say that was like a big part of the growth story of MapMy, because there were months that with Apple and Google promoting us, not only were we the number one app in health and fitness, we were the number one app overall for the store, like above games. This was before social media had really taken off. So it was a moment for us, and that lasted for, I would say even when we sold to Under Armour, we had 20 million users. So, I mean, it had grown very, very quickly over 5 years, very quickly from the App Store launch.
And then when Under Armour acquired this MapMy from you, you went in-house with Under Armour and worked there as their chief digital officer and built an entire ecosystem of apps. So, which is where we started with MapMyFitness, right? Is the app that I think a lot of people transcended well beyond like endurance sports. It's everyday health and wellness.
Well, I think so. We bought a company called MyFitnessPal.
Okay.
And MyFitnessPal was the largest food tracking system in the world, kind of social network around food tracking. We launched a product called Under Armour Record that was about aggregating all of these different apps that we had. We launched hardware. I launched a connected shoe for Under Armour. We launched what was called Health Box that had a scale and a heart rate strap and a wearable with it. And so that entire ecosystem that we were building out at Under Armour, it had 250 million registered users on it when I left in 2016. And so, it was definitely an enormous platform that, again, I would say didn't really get nurtured and didn't have a lot of strategic vision, unfortunately, after, myself and Mike Lee left, in 2016 and 2017.
But it's still around. Or not MapMyFitness.
Yeah, no, MapMyFitness I bought back. It's now owned by Outside.
Okay,
so we bought it back from Under Armour in August of this year. So now we own MapMyFitness, MapMyRun, MapMyRide, MapMyWalk are the 4 major apps, and then we're gonna, certainly we own a lot of brands in the MapMy space, so we're looking to launch other vertical apps in that space as well.
So were you working in tech at the time, or what were you doing that you had? I know that you had that at that time, like apps weren't a business and it wasn't a thing, but was your first like foray into tech and all of this with developing these programs?
No, I worked at Reuters for almost a decade, and I was responsible for a lot of product development there. A matter of fact, we built an advisor tool. I did a lot of work around building databases and building sort of data systems for sale, for data packaging. So I would say that I had a lot of tech familiarity. Like I helped launch Reuters.com in 2001. So there was a lot of. I wouldn't say it was foreign to me. I absolutely knew that when I went into business that I was going to do something around sort of web and mobile tech just because I had seen it thrive at the companies that I had been at.
Got it. And so you had that kind of background also, but you had that like kind of foresight to know or have like a pioneer moment where you were just developing all these things that didn't exist that now are super well known.
I wouldn't say that at the time it was like when we started building MapMy, I very much thought about it like it was sort of a side project, Marnie. Like I didn't think like, oh, this is going to be my profession or this is going to be this huge thing. What I would say is that when the iPhone really took off, I'm saying like in 2009, that's when I was like, oh no, this is going to be something big. This is going to be like this. There's going to be a lot of tailwinds around mobile. And so I at some level, entrepreneurship, I would argue, is luck. There is a certain amount of luck involved in timing,
right? The
category that you're in, all of those things matter. So I wouldn't say that it was like I had a much clearer vision for Outside.
Right.
Than I did for MapMy, because that was certainly, I was a little bit naive, I guess I would say, Marnie, back then.
Yeah. So let's talk about Outside, because I feel like you saved the endurance sports media industry by starting and forming Outside, which was originally, it was Pocket Outdoor Media back before 2021. You came in, you bought it, and you developed and built out all of these incredible brands, saved some of the iconic brands, and it's pretty amazing. Just to say that I worked in media, I was on a PR person and for a long time and saw the death of the magazine happening here in my neighborhood in New York, like with Condé Nast and Hearst and bye-bye magazines, bye-bye print. And a lot of brands struggled to really transition their brands or their media brands into digital. And I think what you've done with Outside Interactive is super incredible. So thank you. And
yeah,
what were you thinking?
Look, I appreciate it. I'm not sure. I think there are people who feel like it was not inevitable that the change in media, and I would say it's a change. I definitely believe that right now media companies have to innovate faster than they've ever innovated before to stay alive. I mean, I think there's a lot of change going on. I would say at some level the story is far from over.
Right.
When we did acquire many of these brands, like the first brands we bought was Velo News and Women's Running and Triathlete magazine. Then we bought, Backpacker and Ski and, Warren Miller Films, Yoga Journal.
Right.
And, I very much had a vision for the fact that I knew from the Map My Fitness data that the average person does like 3 activities in a year. And so I was like, well, it's a little bit weird that like if I'm a skier on Ski Magazine, that like the website shows that I'm there, like let's say I visit multiple times a week during the months of like December to March or April, and then all of a sudden I just disappear. Like they wouldn't know where I went. I'd just be gone because seasonally I'm not thinking about skiing anymore, right? But in our ecosystem, we can tell like if you're skiing or snowboarding or cross-country skiing in the winter and then you switch to mountain biking or running in the summer, we can transition you through that on the platform and connect you to things that are relevant to those categories at that moment. And so I do think that that's a pretty big revolution in terms of how to think about the consumer in these categories. And, look, we're not just, it's interesting, like, because we have such famous media brands,
right?
People think we're a media company. I would actually argue we're not a media company. We're more of a platform company because we now, like, the biggest base of users we have is actually in the mapping technology. So Trailforks, Gaia, and MapMyFitness have, it's a huge base of users.
Yeah.
And so, that's one part of it. And then the other part is we own, an event registration platform. We own an event photography platform. So like what we're really trying to do, Marnie, is we're trying to think about first, how do we inspire you through the content? And that content could be video, audio, written, whatever, medium you want.
Right.
And then from inspiration, how do we take you into activation? How do I get you to register for an event? How do I get you to go out and do a hike? How do I get you through that process so that and then ultimately, how do you celebrate that moment when you finish that run or finish that marathon or, finish that triathlon? We want to kind of be there across all of those steps, with you. And so, like that, we're trying to build an ecosystem and a platform where we're really helping the consumer through their entire sort of active lifestyle journey.
That's amazing. And so are you having success with bringing, say, yoga into the worlds of runners or skiers or, cyclists and vice versa? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're seeing
from a
lot
content
of
perspective. Yeah.
We're starting to do more, directed content. Like you might see on Yoga Journal something like, 10 poses to, do after your, latest run or your latest, climb or things like that. So we're cross-pollinating the content better than we ever have because they are integrated now. And we're trying to really get the, the editorial teams and, the sort of, the consumer base to really help us focus on that. Because it is really important to how we think about the journey.
And then you mentioned that you have event companies as well.
We don't. So we have a couple of our own events. We have the Outside Festival, which is in Colorado, which is a big sort of 2-day consumer event that is meant to sort of be like South by Southwest for the outdoors, right? Like it has experiential, it has music, it has film, it has ideas. We're expecting 25,000 people this summer, at the beginning of the summer, like ticket sales, like for the event. So like, it's a big event.
Yeah.
And then we have the Warren Miller Theater Tour, which is just about to wrap up, most successful year we've ever had this year, with the Warren Miller 75. But we don't own endurance events. We power them through the registration and photography platforms that we have. So we let you register for, we have 6,000 events we do registration for between bike reg, run reg, ski reg, tri reg, so we do a lot of event registration, but we don't actually own the events themselves.
Got it. And so your consumer could basically, you're an all-in-one shop for consumers who are looking for adventure, fitness, lifestyle. Yeah.
Exactly. We want to try to provide as much as we can to help them in that journey.
And now, where are you bringing in specific wellness into the mix in the future? Is that something, I know you have a background in that as well, from working with that DNA company that you worked with. So I know that it's not foreign to you with Helix and everything. Would you?
I think we want to help people be as healthy as possible. We think spending time outdoors is a critical part of that.
Right.
But I would say that, there's a bunch of things on the wellness. Like, we do own public, we own platforms and websites like Clean Eating and Vegetarian Times and, I would say Yoga Journal and Oxygen, which is a fitness destination.
Oxygen.
Yeah, Oxygen, a fitness destination. So, like, I would say that wellness is as core to the outside platform as anything. And I would say that we're seeing more and more sort of traffic generated. We're integrating with products like Aura and Whoop and other things on the platform that you can sync your device to our platform. So no, we're very bullish on the tailwinds that are happening in wellness in general.
So you have over 25 brands.
We have 27 brands now, and they're all integrated with single sign-on, one membership across the platform, which is called Outside Plus. So it's really about, for us, it's how we integrate that experience that's really, really key.
That's one of your sort of like revenue models, is the subscription membership. Yeah. And then it's like everything else.
Yeah, I mean, we think about our business, like if you think about the businesses that we bought,
right,
we were largely advertising based. Today, only half of our business is advertising and the other half is subscription, or essentially, SaaS platforms like the registration platforms and events and commerce. So like, we're very much trying to figure out how to diversify the revenue so we're not as reliant on advertising. I mean, frankly, the media companies that are reliant solely on advertising, I do not think will be around in 4 to 5 years. Like, I just think that the ecosystem around advertising is way too challenging.
Yeah, it's a big uphill battle, even having one podcast. Like, you really need to have multiple channels to engage with consumers, and like, it cannot just be advertising. Like, it just doesn't work.
It's just it's too challenging to get the dollars away from the Magnificent Seven tech companies.
Right.
And, I would just say, I think all businesses that sort of sit in the world of having some media in them, and I don't care, to your point, what form, it's podcasting, it's video, it's TV, whatever it is, they got to start figuring out how to diversify their revenue.
I like your event concept that you're doing in Colorado. The people like to engage in person, and then they like to consume their content. I think it's really interesting because when you started, I mean, were you thinking, I want to buy, Pocket Media and build this whole platform? Or like, how long were you thinking about that before you did it? Because it was right at the pandemic, like right on that.
Yeah, I mean, I had been thinking, to be clear, because at Under Armour, we were trying to build something very similar, to be clear. Like, it was like the strategy was not that different. So, I mean, I would argue I've been thinking about this holistic approach to inspiration, activation, and celebration for, I would say MapMy even had a lot of the same sort of framework to it. So I'd say I've been thinking about this for 20 years. I would say on Outside, I specifically went into it from an acquisition strategy perspective, thinking about how I was going to build this ecosystem. Like, it was from the very first publication we bought. It wasn't like that was all we were going to do. It was much just the beginning pieces. And then I think it sort of took people by surprise during COVID, because all of a sudden it was like, I would say in February of 21, when we announced Outside Magazine, Outside Television, Gaia GPS, Athlete Reg, and like Peloton magazine, like I think a lot of people were like, holy cow. Like I thought they were just kind of over here doing some like distressed like publication thing. And now all of a sudden they're like the biggest thing in, sort of outdoor active lifestyle media with all these other components. And so I guess I would just say like it felt to people like it was sort of non-strategic, like it was opportunistic.
Yeah.
But very much we were thinking about it all along.
It's funny because when I saw that happen and I saw the press releases, I thought it was brilliant. Like I thought it was the most brilliant thing I had seen because I had worked in media. And I thought like this guy knows what he's doing. And this is such a great move because all the other that was like a time, if I can like kind of think back to what was I doing, I had been doing PR and it was like over. Media was done. Like in my opinion, right? It's a whole new world. And thanks for the pandemic and people retaining more content and having time to read and absorb or watch YouTube or listen to podcasts. But up until that point, it was like this big 3-year transition and probably had been going on before. But I just watched all of the people I worked with, like my entire career, go in-house at brands and start writing content. Or, this magazine was gone, that magazine was gone. And no, they couldn't turn it around, like to build the digital content because it was just not a concept that everybody was on board with at that time. And I think when I saw you kind of come on board at Pocket Media and outside and start to build that, I was like, all right, let's see what happens. This looks really cool. Because you came you came from a digital background. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, we still have a lot of work to do, but look, there's no, I say to the team all day, like you have to remain vigilant. You have to remain paranoid at some level because, it is a very, very challenging environment. I would say that, yes, we have some scale now. We obviously have a great team. I mean, yesterday I just announced 4 new executives to the team. So like we have a phenomenal team. But there are lots and lots of challenges. Like it's building any business. I don't care how big or small. It's like it's a daily firefight at some level of like making sure that you can keep, sort of like progressing in the right direction.
Can you ever just like enjoy the wins or you always have to be like one step ahead?
Yeah. It's, one thing I say is like, I'm not actually very good at the celebration moments. Like I say that to the team. Sometimes I'm like, team, if you really feel like this is a moment that like, we got to stop and, sip the champagne, like you got to tell me because like, I'm kind of like, again, I go back a little bit to like even my sporting life, like you kind of like have a victory and then you just kind of move on to the next thing. Right. And so I would say just personally, I'm not good at it. And so I have to have people on the team remind me, but don't get me wrong. I mean, I love my life, Marnie. Like I have the greatest job. I mean, I joke a little bit, being the CEO of the outside is not the worst thing in the world. And I say the outside because like, I get to go to a lot of great things. Like I get to be at Crankworks and Whistler and I get to go to World Cup events and I get to go to the tour and I get to go, like to New York Marathon and I'm extremely blessed. And, I try to remind the team that we are very fortunate that we can, do well, give back, and work on the things that we are in an industry that we love.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's important. At least you can kind of like think that. And then, are you the same way like with the wins that you are with the failures, or do you kind of spend more time on that?
I always try to do a retrospective when we have failures, but I don't mind them at all. What I mean by that is, failure is like I'm using an example. There's a great look. We've definitely worked on some things at outside that people would consider massive failures for sure. And like we did a big exploration. Although to me it had a very clear gamification mechanics of getting people outdoors. We had a big push into Web3 2 years ago.
Okay.
Right. And it was like a test, and we probably invested, even though it wasn't a lot of the company's resources, probably too much. Mm-hmm. But I always love this quote from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, where you might remember a product that they tried to get to market called the Fire Phone, right? Mm-hmm. It was like their attempt to launch their own like mobile device against Apple and Google, right? And, it was a huge failure. I'm talking billions of dollars, like literally just like throw it in the dumpster, fire, right? And he gets up on stage and he's talking about it when they were shutting it down. And, somebody on the stage is like, oh my God, Jeff, like, how do you handle such a big failure? And Jeff says, well, we're working on our next even bigger failure right now. You know what I mean? Or multiple bigger failures right now. Right. And I think that you have to be willing to not listen to the noise of people around you and external factors and all that. And you have to be willing, if you believe in something, to try it, because even if it's a failure, you will learn something from it in the process.
And how long do you think, like, you give something? Like, is there an expiration date in your opinion of, like, is it 5 years, 10 years, and you're like, I'm out? Or, like, do you have any kind of things like that in your toolbox for success?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think some projects you can
I'm asking for a friend. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, some projects you can time box and others you can't. Like, there are certainly things that, if I'm using example, like if there's, you have to be willing to kill features. Like if you build something in one of the mapping apps, like you build a new feature in the mapping app and no one uses it, you got to be willing to rip it out, not just kind of like keep it there because it actually, confuses the user and, things like that. So, I think for certain things we have a good model for like, how long do you test it? How long do you see it goes? Others, it has to do with market reaction and your users and what they're telling you. I think you have to have some process around how long do you keep investing in something before you kind of pull the plug on it. Yeah.
And like how hard or how easy is it in terms of consumer acquisition and keeping people in the cycle and in your ecosystem?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons we bought the media sites was because, we don't spend a lot on external marketing at all because we have so much organic traffic. I mean, we have about 80 million monthly unique users across the platform, across TV, mobile apps, websites, print, like all the distribution channels. So, we're very fortunate that we kind of have this embedded organic ecosystem that kind of comes back to our properties over and over and over. So, we're lucky we don't have to spend a lot on external marketing because we just have a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people that come to us for various needs. But, we've continued to grow that. It's up, tremendously over the last 4 or 5 years as we've continued to build and add on. And so, it's really important. Like that organic audience is really important to the success of Outside in the long run.
In a world where people expect content free, how do you, like, people pay for your content, like people pay to subscribe to Outside. So have you had any challenges with that, or you're just like, look, you pay or you don't pay? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not a pay or don't pay on Outside. I mean, to be clear, like you can come read a certain number of articles and engage with a certain number of features on the mapping apps and things like that. But I do think the world has changed a lot. Like I remember when I started MapMyFitness, I mean, we used to have this joke that like there was this cartoon published once that it was like, basically this person was like, they went to buy, their first car and they're like, oh, it's only, $80,000. And then the next thing is they go and they purchase like, a major new appliance and it's like, whatever, $900, and then a TV for $500. And then, they're at Starbucks and they're spending $8 for a cup of coffee. And then the last visual in this cartoon is like the person in the app store, and they're like going to buy an app, and they're like, $1? I'm not paying $1 for an app, like losing their mind. Call the tax accountants, call the lawyers, like, for $1, I'm not spending it, and I think a little bit, Marnie, like we've had to, like, I think the industry's had to overcome that at some level, because realistically at this point, at one time, I mean, just use an example, like if you take the publications, at one time, they made an enormous amount of money from advertising. The reality is that less than 50% of the costs of running media is supported by advertising now. So the only other way to support it is through consumers wanting to pay, right? Yeah. And so like that switch has been painful for many consumers because they used to get everything for free, right? But I think if it's really important to them that they can, and they want to support, again, like a company like Outside, I think it's important that they pay.
Yeah. And I think it's like a great ecosystem to be part of as well. Like, I just think there's certain content that, like, so people pay for the New York Times, they pay for the, subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal. I was just curious, like, how that business model is doing, because there's certain things that are free, certain things that aren't. So I feel like it's like an old conversation. Yeah.
There's a lot of free content out there, to be clear. There's a lot. But the question now with things like AI is like, do you trust it? Like, is it authentic? Is it good? And I still have this belief that great storytelling and authenticity from a brand perspective are going to really matter in this sort of next cycle of the world. So, I mean, I'm bullish on brands and authentic authors and freelancers and podcasters. Like, I'm bullish, because I think humans, not bots, but humans will search them out.
Yeah. What are some big outdoor trends that you're seeing, just industry trends, like future outlook stuff?
Well, I mean, I honestly, it's interesting. Like, a lot of people ask me about things like GLP-1 drugs, and I'm actually very bullish on the fact that it's going to make people want to move more. So, like, when somebody loses 10 pounds, when somebody loses 10 pounds, they move more, period. It's like, you can look at it in the data, whether it's like Fitbit data or I don't care. When they lose 10 pounds, no matter for whatever reason, they move more. So like, I would say, I think there's the GLP-1s that I think are going to be very bullish for the category. You can already see it. Like, if you listen to the reports, like the earnings reports from the gyms, they're getting more people signing up because they're on GLP-1s, right?
Right.
So I'm pretty bullish on that trend. Mm-hmm. Again, from a scientific perspective, I'm not advocating one way or the other.
Right. It's just what you think.
Literally saying a bunch of people on this type of medication, I think that it's bullish for what I'd call sort of outdoor fitness, active lifestyle.
Okay.
I think the other trend, running is having a moment. Like, running is
like
just
the third time.
it's like, it is running crazy right now, whether it's like the groups people meet in, it's just the events, like running is having a moment. And then, I would say there's this switch from, like, I actually look at what's happened to a lot of the material, like the hard goods, soft goods businesses in our categories, and they've really struggled the last 2-3 years, right? And I actually think it's a broader theme, which is I think people are moving from consumerism to experiential. And so they're moving away from buying as many things that sit, that are physical.
Right.
And they're moving to spending those more on experiences. And so that's why I'm very bullish for, like, people getting into new types of activities, going to new types of events, going places, like travel. Like, we do a huge amount of travel content and activation around, like, what to do and where to go.
Right. Like racecations or like, yeah,
exactly. And I think that's a big opportunity for the industry, is how do you engage people from an experiential perspective, because I do think it's really going to matter.
I think that people want to be in person, and that's why the running is having a boom again, because of all the running clubs, because running is easy to do. I mean, it's not easy to do, but it's accessible. It's more accessible than
It's
buying a bike. Getting skis.
I mean, it's not expensive. You need a pair of shoes, a pair of shorts. You can run in a cotton t-shirt if you want. Like, it's not like, it's very accessible. Very.
Yeah. So I think and I think that like what I'm seeing is that, just even living here in New York City, it's like there's just so much happening in person. And even when I do events or go to events in person, everything is like, there's like a connection between like what people see online, on Instagram, on your podcast, in the media, to what they see in person. So that, I think that is like a really interesting thing. And it kind of feels nice, right, to be back in person.
Yeah. I mean, look, I am all about in person. I mean, I love going to events. That's why I try to go to a fair number of cycling and running events, and all the different categories of things that we engage with. I do a fair amount on the skiing side in the winter. Obviously, things like our festival, the theater tour, like I love being in person.
So festivals in the winter.
No, festival. So the Warren Miller Theater Tour is in the winter. It's just wrapping up.
Okay.
300 plus theaters across the U.S. that we showed at Warren Miller 75, which is the 75th year of the film. And then the Outside Festival is the last weekend, or the first weekend of June, last weekend of May. So like this year, it's May 30th, 31st, and June 1st.
And what's happening at the outdoor festival?
I mean, everything. We're going to announce that tickets go on sale next week. You'll hear about the amazing bands that we've recruited to be part of the festival. We have a lot of experiential things, kids areas. We gave all kids under 13 free access last year. So, we had a couple thousand kids experience the festival. We'll have, an ideas track that like last year had Diana Nyad there and Jimmy Chin and, Sean White. So we'll have more speakers, lineups, everything against the festival. And then we'll have the film festival that's part of it too. So all of that is happening in that weekend at the end of May, early June.
In Colorado.
In Colorado, downtown
So people
Denver.
can come and stay at hotels from around the world and come and dial in, and there's tons of places to stay. And
if festival, you can just go to the Outside Festival or festival.outsideonline.com.
Awesome. I'm going to definitely check it out. What's something that you're doing personally for fitness and exercise? Like, obviously, you're in the epicenter of all things. So make me jealous. What do you do to stay healthy and fit?
I do like three things. Like
Okay.
I ski in the winter. I, kind of do all cycling types in the summer, mountain bike, road, gravel, which is amazing here in Boulder. Like we have amazing, all three of them, and then I do a fair amount of hiking, some with my family, some like business hiking, things like that. But like I do a fair amount of hiking. So those are kind of my three things that I do. I don't like heights, so I'm not a good climber. I don't love to run. It's painful for me.
Okay.
I've never loved to run. I have done a marathon, but I would tell you it was my worst sporting day of my life. So like those three things that I do, that I really enjoy them, and I do a lot of them.
How do you ski if you don't like heights? Like, how do you get up on the chairlift?
I don't love it. Okay. I don't love being on chairlifts, to be clear, but I feel like the safety is good enough that I'm not going to fall off. Whereas like when if I'm climbing, even with ropes, it's too terrifying for me.
Yeah. And what can we expect to see besides all the things that we mentioned, the future of outside interactive moving forward?
Yeah. So, obviously the events like the Outside Festival and, Warren Miller will continue to be big draws for us. We are, this will come out at a time where we are changing the format of Outside Magazine to 4 times a year, more higher quality, more like more coffee table like, volume like. So that's going to be coming out in Q1. Really exciting. We've a new person that's been building and working on print, and so excited about that relaunch. We got a lot coming around the social platform. So we launched the Outside social platform about 2.5 months ago. It's going really well, but we have a lot of new features coming for users to interact on the platform and share content and put user generated content on the platform. So lots more happening there. And it's going to be an exciting 2025, and we just have a lot in the works, and a lot of big opportunities from a partnership perspective and other things that we're working on. And as I mentioned, 4 new executives that just recently started that we just announced yesterday. And so, just excited for them to kind of get rolling.
That's awesome. And what is something called Run that you launched?
So we relaunched, we had Trail Runner, women's running, and did some running content on Outside. And we relaunched all of that into a new brand called Outside Run.
Okay.
And you can go to run.outsideonline.com, and that's where now all of our running content and sort of utilities, and we'll be bringing more of the MapMyRun community stuff into that platform as well. So just really a big new focus for us around running. That launched earlier in 24 and has gone extremely well. We have a great team there, really pushing the boundaries on how they think about run and run product and run travel and all of those things. So I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Well, this was super great. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning into Marnie on the Move. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social at Marnie on the Move for Facebook and Instagram. Head over to our website, marnieonthemove.com. For more info on this episode, links in the show notes, and of course, sign up for our quarterly newsletter, The Download, to get updates, deals, giveaways, and information on future events.